Hosts are Polly and Dan. I'm Dan. Right, should we get going?
Can I be you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I Polly?
Yep.
I'm not going to do that. Lee, welcome. Another episode. Listeners, welcome. Another episode. Viewers?
2025, Happy New Year.
Viewers? Watchers? Welcome.
Viewers, listeners.
Do you say watchers or viewers? Anyway, another episode. So yeah, 2025, we're back. This is something we've touched on, and I know touched on previously, but I think we want to dive into it a little bit more detail. And this might almost sound interviewy because I know that you feel very strongly about this topic, which is brand versus direct response, direct selling, and whether a balance between the two is achievable, should be achievable, and how you start thinking about it. But often it's brand versus direct response. So I want to dig into this as a topic. And I know you have some experience and thoughts. So let's do it. So a little bit of structure about what I want us to cover, focusing too much on one over the other, what the challenges are of balancing both brand and direct response, direct selling, any challenges that businesses face when they're trying to balance the two. And ultimately, I think the best place to start is I'd quite like to hear in your own words something which is helpful for a podcast episode. What is brand awareness, in your opinion and your experience and your words, and what is direct response, direct selling? Tackle it however you want, but how do you see them?
There's two layers to brand awareness. The first one being a brand that is known amongst an audience. So recognition in terms of visually or association with a product like Ford make cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be a good example.
Yep.
Then good brand awareness is association, like I've just described, but also ownership of product or a category with that. So there's two layers. There's building a brand which is recognized,
Mm-hmm.
which can be done through advertising, but if no one knows then what's behind the brand, the purpose of having brand awareness is starting to fall down a little bit.
Yeah.
So I gave the example of Ford. Ford's a well-known brand.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that they make cars. Everybody probably could name 2 or 3 models that they also produce.
Yeah.
Good brand awareness. McDonald's. Everybody in the world knows McDonald's as brand logo, and also could then probably name you the flagship products.
Mm-hmm.
Good brand awareness. I'm trying to think of a poor example.
Well, I've got some examples later on that I want to discuss that are almost like bringing to life a few of the challenges that businesses and brands we've seen and businesses might have today to try and either strike that balance or not. The finger is in the air, you have a brand.
Solo Stove campaign from last year.
Yeah.
I think for a short period they achieved mainstream conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet if you discussed that campaign with someone that knew it and that was able to recall the brand, they wouldn't be able to tell you what products or what they would go there for in detail. You could probably speculate from the name.
Slight tangent, but obviously related. That campaign, was it just a bit of a buzz around the marketing community as marketers talking about it more than it being away from marketing circles?
There was 2 facets to it, wasn't there? There was that, which was probably certainly in our circles, probably predominantly what we saw it for,
Yeah.
but also then obviously Snoop Dogg carries a lot of audience just in general. And I think that had its own audience, which is where I think in terms of like impossible to measure, but how many times someone said the brand name, that campaign succeeded. And the creative and the execution was great. But I think like now, which is where you need to get the balance right.
When you say now, that's a time thing. So where does time come into all this? I know you've just answered about brand so far, but what's the framework of time around these two things? Like brand, is brand explicitly long term versus, on the other hand, direct response being explicitly short term, or is it a bit muddier than that in your sort of opinion? Because they're typically said in that way, but I'm not sure I'm convinced that it's quite as opposite ends of the spectrum.
I think brand inherently is long term because it's more difficult to achieve status where you've got recognition across a category and then a set of products or services. That's not a short term possibility, really. But with the way that technology has come on and the entry to market possibilities for a brand now, what I'm certainly seeing is there's a lot of brands that are popping up that are not designing for long term. They fall into the trap of the launch, they put money into performance and growth marketing. They might have a nice site, they might have a nice logo, they might have good social, but they then fall into a cycle of having to either over aggressively advertise or constantly refresh offers or products or both. And then, so if you take that as an example, let's say we launch a fashion brand, get it up, Shopify site, we've got a brand, we launch a load of creative across Facebook, we get some sales, we get a flow, we repeat the process. Over time, you'll see diminishing returns, but also think about the effect then if you stop that advertising and what that would mean. Whereas, well, it'd fall on its ass, it'd fail. And then what happens is the brand escalates cost because they think they've got a audience and they've got a flow of sales coming in, the scale. And then if for whatever reason Google or the platforms increase the cost, they can't sustain it, then they have to have a dip in ads or they turn it off, gone, and then that brand falls down. Whereas take an example of someone like Represent, who have created not only quite an exclusive product, like their creative director does all the designs, curates the clothes. It's a fashion brand that's not, now they've scaled, they've got a vast amount of product, but it's not like a fast fashion brand. It's a brand that have set out to do something and they stand for something and they've created an audience which is massively loyal, which means I think if they did no marketing, they would still generate sales. And I think there's two different approaches. Gymshark or another one.
I was about
community,
to ask you.
Great brand, good products. That community would continue, I think, probably regardless. But what creating a brand requires is strength of presence. But it's knowing where that investment and what the right approach for that is that fits with your audience. And that's a custom narrative per platform. That's a understanding of who you're speaking to. Those are elements of good brand and good brand performance. And then I think like you do a product drop as a Gymshark and you have a search strategy and campaigns and budget associated with direct response, that's where it becomes effective, because your marketing spend against the direct response is effective and it's cost effective because you've got the brand.
So brand almost gives you a license with if you've got community audience buying.
If we live in a world where everything pretty much is commoditized, so brand done in the right way is difficult, but the payoff is longevity.
Yeah.
And I think when you're starting from absolute scratch, the question that you need to ask is, do I want to build a business that's going to last and be sustainable, or do I want to make as much money as I can as fast as I can, knowing that I can't sustain that?
Yeah. How hard must it be though, for exactly in the scenario that you gave earlier about the fashion brand, starting a fashion brand, going on Shopify, and then you were talking about starting from scratch. How hard is it to not just think pounds and dollars?
It's super hard.
And I think that's where it's almost like we've just talked about brand giving you license to be able to, like you just said, new product drop, running whatever direct response campaign activity. Brand sets you up with the license within those target community audience groups to be able to do that.
But
effectively,
in the same way that I was just said there about everything's commoditized, the barrier to entry for a brand is so low. But that doesn't mean that you can't get access to what you need to create a great product. So in the same way that you're thinking, right, I need to generate cash, whilst that's valid, you also have more access than ever before to be able to create a product that gives not only the impression, but also provides the experience to build brand at the same time.
Yeah.
So taking a fashion brand, you can go and get cheap clothing, put a brand on it and sell it, and you will get sales. However, using Represent as another example, you can tailor the products and curate the collections and develop something that is unique enough to make people feel special from the outset, like they've done. And then when you put the hard yards in up front, you can be where they're going.
What do you, we've talked about a couple of things there, but what do you see as the factors that would be influencing and driving a organization, a brand, to be relatively neglecting brand and just really focusing on direct response? And one of the questions I want to ask you there, in terms of many factors that might be at play, obviously I'm sure COVID, the environment, things that, political, social things, environmental things that go on in the background. But what about outside investment in a business and a brand?
Outside investment is both a gift and a curse, I think, because investment doesn't guarantee that you're going to build a brand. It means that you've got more space to think about how you're going to enter the market. And I think that question that we asked at the start, where it's, do I want to build a sustainable brand, or do I want to get as much cash through the door as possible, is still relevant.
Yeah.
And I think you can still take both approaches and you can still fail.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think VC investment in tech, for example, prevalent, lots of money,
big,
doesn't guarantee success.
No.
I think it's about the experience. With tech, it's about the product. Have you got market fit? If you've got market fit, then great. That means you've got a product that people are going to use. Then as a logical move, the missing part of having a product that people are going to use that's got a market fit that you've validated is the brand.
Yeah.
So that decision is already sort of made.
I read a really interesting article yesterday in prep for today, and I actually plugged in. I was running some research on exactly that, in the tech space. And Slack, interestingly, came up as a brand example for that. So from a functionality perspective and a market fit perspective, they were spot on, and I would argue still are spot on in that box ticking exercise. And then what they then layered in on top of that. So it was a, let's go product first and market fit, tick that box. So they were then quite aggressive on direct response activity around that. Then they recognised the bigger picture from a brand perspective about, again, almost going into communities and audience and start widening the narrative around what they do and what they stand for around connection obviously internally and externally, because like you say, like we've said, we use Slack internally, but also we connect with some of our clients through there, and they've sort of built on that then out from there, and you then see that in the mix of activity that they would run throughout that journey as being very direct response to begin with, and then a recognition of it, blowing it out a little bit more, and then, as I said, storytelling around connection. Obviously COVID came as well, and that's
huge.
Yeah, and that's where I was asking you about the factors, that obviously there are environmental factors that would ironically force your hand, because we talked about performance marketing and direct response a lot, didn't we, during COVID and aftermath of COVID. But then you've got a Slack who almost were able to capitalize on something like COVID in the reverse of that, so about brand and community and connection, which was really interesting.
Slack hit critical mass and then put pounds and pence behind the marketing to grow volume, which was smart.
Yeah.
A good example of using Slack would be, this is going to be a long-winded analogy, but Slack have reached a point, I think, where Google have got to in terms of brand. Like, Google it is a verb that is the product and the core thing that Google do.
Yeah.
Slack have almost reached that, in that your conversation professionally, generally, Slack would be, can you Slack me it?
Yeah.
Whereas you take Teams, if someone was going to use that in the same context, would say, can you send me it on Teams?
Yeah.
Not, can you Teams me it?
Yeah.
Can you Slack me it? Is commonplace.
Yeah.
And what's happened there is Slack have been a challenger, come into market, got a great product ahead of time. Obviously, it's been nudged on by COVID, but when they've hit critical mass, they've accelerated it through growth and performance. And that's further enhanced the brand. Microsoft had user base and critical mass, and then have expedited teams to fit the market and to compete. Yet, arguably, controversially perhaps, Slack, in my mind, is a better product and more successful than Teams.
Yeah, well, it is. But it's not just in your mind.
That gives you two really good angles of entering a space and creating and building a brand, and owning an audience within a sector, and being able to launch a product. That's what people underestimate about Google. Google have got such power in the audience that they've got access to, that when they launch a product, I mean, how many products in the last 10 years have come in and failed and gone?
Yeah.
Because Google's always putting things out to test and learn and see. And people think that they're doing that as they don't know what to do, that they failed. The learnings that they're getting from that approach is insane.
Yeah, it's like you say, they've got people at their fingertips.
But that's through 25 years of building brand in the right way, and building a product that no one else competed with until recently. Like the search dominance that they've had from creating a product that was just out in front for ages in the quality that it delivered.
Yeah, it was interesting reading about Slack, and a few other examples came up that I just wanted to throw your way, but I'm mindful I haven't even got your answer to what is direct response, because we've gone off on one. But in your opinion and how you view it,
direct response is transactional, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't matter what the platform is. It's, I'm going to spend a tenner and I'm going to get back 25 quid.
Yeah. Returns.
And it starts there and ends there. That's direct response in my mind.
Yeah.
It's short term.
Doesn't brand also give you license to look at your margins as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, brand done well reduces your cost.
Yeah. So there's huge overlap, and that's why I said right at the beginning about versus brand versus direct response. It's
you need both.
Yeah,
you need both, but I think building brand or approaching your strategy with brand at the center is the best and the strongest driver for returns.
Yeah.
Like, you build brand, everybody benefits.
I agree. I want to throw some other brand names at you from the research that are not in tech. DFS in the UK, inherently known for direct response, almost like the iRoll brand. People, all right, yeah, we're coming into DFS territory. But I wanted to, when I say territory, I mean like obviously Boxing Day sales, January sales. DFS are the ones that you think of. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone's at it around that time, but DFS are one of those that immediately come to mind. I'm specifically talking above the line here, but also you see that on digital as well. Where do you see? So I think the given there is you can see the direct response stuff. It's very promotion heavy. It's very with the aim of transactions, and you imagine obviously returns. But where does brand come into it from just the outside looking in from your side? Do you even think brand with DFS, or do you just, like I've done and many people, the rhetoric online is very much like, oh, it's promotions, iRoll, DFS?
I don't think DFS will be around in 20 years.
And is that because of that?
I think DFS are a legacy brand that had a huge brick and mortar footprint. So when you thought of Sofa, you thought DFS because there wasn't a huge amount of competition. Now there is. There's Barker Stonehouse, Furniture Village, Sofology.
Yeah.
You can go to a retail park and go to a DFS and there's a sofa competitor next door.
Yeah.
I think that's only going to increase. And DFS almost were ahead of the curve for falling into the trap of what brands are doing that are launching now, in that they're going in, becoming a sale brand, rely on that, and then have to keep it up, otherwise they can't turn it off. And I think a lot of you've got to think of DFS's revenue model as well with credit. They'll have people that bought a sofa 5 years ago that's still paying for it.
Yeah.
So there's like a legacy churn of.
Yeah. Two more I want to chuck your way. First one is Currys, and particularly Currys in the last 12 to 18 months. And I think that I would say you can see a shift there, an obvious shift.
100%.
Because I would say that how we've just described DFS from a very promotions-led product, promotions, deals, offers, Currys a couple of years ago and beyond, that's all I thought of. And again, I would say, would you say a similar story to DFS and sofas and physical retail and lack of competitors? Obviously, PC World used to exist and then it became Currys, didn't it? Did Currys get?
Yeah.
But what have you observed about Currys now lately? And 3 as well, the mobile company.
3, yeah. I mean, Currys have just done a phenomenal job of understanding that as a high street legacy brand, they need to focus on the next generation of customers to make sure that they're going to be around.
Yeah.
DFS aren't doing that,
no,
as far as I know. They've taken the approach aggressively in the last 12 months of understanding the nuances of content types per platform, and they've done a phenomenal job of creating content that resonates on each.
Yeah.
TikTok stands out.
Yeah.
As probably the highlight for them for the last 12 months. Yeah. And it's such a smart approach looking at your audience. Like the 40, 50-year-old bloke that goes to Curry's to buy a telly is going to go to Curry's and buy a telly regardless of whether he sees them on social media or not. A 24-year-old who's buying their first telly, who's moving into a house or the flat for the first time, will probably think Amazon first. But I would argue this January versus last January will probably think of Curry's in the same thought process.
I agree.
Because of the work that they've done over the last 12 months.
I agree.
And that is going to protect them for the next 15 years.
And in a similar way, I've seen a shift with 3 and mobile, what do you call them? Mobile operators, whatever they're called. I've seen a shift in a little bit more like storytelling, some of their work recently. And again, that's a very competitive space where inherently it's very much promotions led.
Well, you look at 2, Vodafone versus 3, for example. Vodafone, huge legacy, owned the market for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And you look at their approach now versus 3's approach, and it's the same thing as like Curry's.
Yeah. And
what Vodafone have done is they've split off Voxy to try and hit that like Gen Z market, and I don't think they've done a great job.
No, it's interesting. I'm mindful we've been going at this, so I think the recurring theme from what we've discussed is you can shift. You maybe should think about shifting, in particular if you're more short-termist, and certainly relying on direct response, because I guess we'd push someone into a corner to ask the question of what are we actually building from a brand perspective, and for a little bit more longevity at least there. But ultimately there's a balance to strike between the two.
There's a balance, but what I would say as a critical point is the people who are in the growth marketing or direct response camp need to understand that the capability of measurement against brand is 10 times better than it has been. We can prove the correlation to bottom line revenue against brand activity and activations and campaigns in the same way that we can for growth marketing.
Yeah.
So as frightening as it might be to put your budget into brand activity, if you take that leap, it will pay off longer term.
And I guess in that, again, back to time, there has to be a stick with it mentality as well.
Well, yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? People don't like change.
Yeah. And also returns are far easier to see quicker. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, if anyone's struggling, speak to us too. This or that. That or this. What's more important? This one. Engagement rate or click-through rate?
Engagement would infer that people have clicked through, so I would say engagement rate.
Yeah, so would I. Long-term campaigns or flash sales?
I would say long-term campaigns and short-term launches or reactive opportunities.
Yeah, like when you were talking about product drops earlier. Social media reach or website conversions? I mean, that, yeah.
Quite linked. I think you probably, if you go for reach, you'll probably see more conversions. It's a brand building activity.
Go for reach. Final one, emotional storytelling or direct product benefits? Presuming that's obviously like message related.
Authenticity.
Deal. Deal.
Yeah, obviously authenticity in both would yield the best.
Yeah.
If you've got a great product and you're talking about it, that's authentic. If you've got an emotional story and that's authentic, will also have a similar resonance.
Job done. Happy New Year.